Border Management Authority says that 443 Zimbabwean children have been rescued while being trafficked into South Africa through the Beitbridge Border post. 42 buses were reportedly searched last night during an operation when unsupervised children were found on board. Commissioner of the Border Management Authority, Mike Masiapato, joins us now to talk about this. A very good evening to you, sir. Good to have your time. First things first, how did you conclude that these were children who were being moved for the purposes of trafficking?
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Tambegile, and thanks for the invite. Maybe let's indicate this first point that as the Border Management Authority, since we started operating, we are effectively doing border management a bit differently. We are actually, or we have actually activated what we call the National Targeting Center in the Border Management Authority, which actually operates through risk modeling, but also operating with the rest of the intelligence community in the Republic. So to that extent, what we then do is we get data regarding certain issues that are of concern in as far as the work of the border management is concerned, and to that extent, we then prepare operations. And I think you will fairly be aware, one of the other popular operations we did was in OR Tambo, where we intercepted 67 Pakistanis who were trying to enter the Republic illegally, and we had to deport them. So this is one of those operations that we had to prepare for based on the information that we have received.
So there's no doubt in your minds that these children were being trafficked, all 443 of them?
Yeah, you see, the concept of trafficking is basically a broader concept, which I suppose the work that is being done now by our colleagues on the ground, together with members of the South African police services, together with the Zimbabwean Republic police officials and the immigration officials on the Zimbabwean side, will ultimately be able to make those final determination, because that on its own would even lead to the actual trafficker themselves. But within the context of what the law provides for, a minor cannot move from one country to the other. One, without parent. Two, without a guardian. And of course, in instances where they have to be moving with a guardian, there has to be legal paperwork that demonstrate that this particular individual is allowed by law, with the consent of the relevant parents or family members, for that particular child to move from one country to the other. So in this instance, we can confirm that as we did this operation overnight with the various buses that we have actually searched on and ultimately got to the number of the children that we actually got. Ultimately, those children, as we have indicated, they are aged below 8, as it were. And those children were not accompanied by any adult, as it were. And to that extent, there was not even any, I would say, guardian that was to be taking care of those children. So to that extent, according to the Immigration Act, we were not allowed to actually accept them into the Republic. But further investigation is ongoing.
And where exactly were they being taken to once in South Africa?
Yeah, you see, the issue of where they supposed to be taken to, we do not have that data. Hence, I'm saying that the actual investigations, at the point where we are then ultimately to be able to pick up the people that had been facilitating the process, as it were. Maybe let me also indicate this point, Tamigile, which is very critical, to say that the actual bus drivers themselves do indicate that they actually were picking up these children in identified location as directed. And that is the essence.
As directed by whom?
As directed by the people they were interacting with, that were actually telling them to go pick them, as it were. And that is why I'm saying the issue of those people behind is what the investigation will ultimately unveil, who those people are. But the reality of it is the current process that is being done by the Zimbabwean government is to be able to identify the families of those children, and they've been doing that during the course of the day. And by the way, the other issue that we can also confirm, because earlier it was not clear, is whether are they all Zimbabweans or not. So that had already been confirmed. All of those children are Zimbabweans, and they are not from any other part of the continent. And the work that is being done is to be able to get to the families. And by the way, the other thing, Temegi, that I know that some colleagues are asking is that, firstly, you will remember when you deal with children, there are certain protocols that needs to be followed through. And one of those that is not allowed is to interrogate or to engage children to be able to source data out of them. If I can still give you that example that I gave earlier of OR Tambo, you will remember with those ones that were adults, we were able to engage them and were able to literally, I would say, do most of the investigative work with them. But in this instance, we are not able to, and that is why we have to then activate other authorities to be able to do further work in as far as the issue is concerned.
What I'm trying to work out, and I appreciate that this is still an ongoing investigation, is what the point of moving these children across the border would have been. Would it have been, for example, to get them involved in child labor, which is illegal, or trafficking for the purposes of sexual exploitation, which we know is also frighteningly common across the world?
Yeah, indeed, Thembekile, we would not be able to reflect on that. But I mean, the example you gave about child labor, I suppose children that are 8 years and below would not necessarily be for that purpose. But what we know is one of the biggest challenges that we have been dealing with over the years, especially for children of this age, is instances where they get brought in and then they get groomed. In other words, they actually get put into places around the environment, and then they get groomed. And once they grow, then they can basically do whatever that they do, which include what we have just indicated, which is sexual exploitation. But for now, we are not having all the destination-related facts around where were they going to into South Africa and what was the ultimate intention. But the main point is they couldn't be allowed into the Republic, and on that basis, we had to then activate the relevant authorities to be able to get them assisted.
Is what happened last night at the Beitbridge Border post a common occurrence, perhaps not at as large a scale where you've got 42 buses and more than 400 children, but is this sort of thing common where you've got busloads of minors, children, traveling without a guardian and seemingly being trafficked?
No, in terms of the numbers, I will say, Thembekile, that it is not common in terms of the numbers. But in terms of the occurrence, that is something that we deal with all the time. And that is something that we deal with, I will say, on a daily basis. By the way, if it was on the South African side, as an example, it is where we activate our colleagues from social development, and it is where we then activate our colleagues, the relevant section of the police that deals with issues of children and all of that. But in this instance, it was an interception before they entered the South African side. So basically, we intercepted them on the North Gate at Beitbridge Border post because it was a sting operation on the basis of the information that we had actually received. So in terms of whether it is daily occurrence or not, indeed, it is something that is a problem. Or maybe let me also indicate this point at Thembekile. You will remember in South Africa, because of this sketch and because of this reality, we even put in regulation that says a single parent cannot be allowed to exit South Africa with a minor child unless they have a letter of consent from another parent. So even if you are a father of a minor child, you cannot just go to OR Tambo and exit the country. We will need a consent letter from the mother. If you are a mother, we need a consent letter from the father. And the reason why we came to those is because there has been incidences where even parents themselves, they exit children, they go and do whatever they do with them that side, and they actually leave them there and they come back. And that has been a problem. That is why we had to bring some of these regulations to deal with the situation. But that is purely for South Africans exiting South Africa. But
Right.
for those that are coming on the other side, we just have to intercept as we have done and do the work.
And just briefly, Dr. Masiapato, what are you able to tell us about the whereabouts of the children now? For example, you were telling us you're unable to question them precisely because they are children. What are their whereabouts? What will become of them in the coming days, in the coming weeks, especially when we don't even know who their parents or guardians are?
The children, as we speak, they are in the hands of the Zimbabwean authority. So that is a government-to-government interface. So they are not like, in disarray or anything. They are in the hands of the government of Zimbabwe. And that means that the Zimbabwean government had activated their social services, they have activated their police investigative unit that deals with children, and they are taking care of that particular process.
Okay.
The only thing we are doing on our side is to interface with them and be able to get some update. And that is really done by our colleagues from the SAPS.
And what are your Zimbabwean colleagues telling you about this? Did they have any inkling that this sort of thing would be happening? I mean, South African authorities were able to intercept this convoy of buses, but did anyone in Zimbabwe know that this was going down?
You see, the things that we deal with to make in the border environment are very much complicated. One of the things that we had to deal with, for instance, is you find on the N1, the South African police services intercept people in a bus, and those people will not have documents. And people will say, but how did these people pass the border when they are sitting in here? So there are very different models that the criminal elements are using, and part of those is to be able to conceal those people, either take them through out of the port and then they get to reconcile with the transport on the other side. So even in this instance, when we called the Zimbabwean colleagues, they were not aware of the reality, and they could not really figure out as to how did those children end up actually in the bus and ultimately to find themselves where they were. Because even on their side, they were not necessarily going to be allowing children to exit Zimbabwe without their parents or even the guardian, especially given the age of those children.
Dr. Michael Masiapato, good to speak to you, Commissioner with the South African Border Management Authority. Thank you so much for your time tonight.